This is a little piece of Africa. The area in orange is Sudan. The part of Sudan that is highlighted in green is South Sudan, and the area in red is North Sudan. Finally, the area in blue is the region known as Darfur. The capital city of Sudan is Khartoum, which is located in the north. Most of the people in North Sudan identify themselves as Arab Muslims. Most of the people in South Sudan identify themselves as Black Christians. And most of the people in Darfur identify themselves as Black Muslims. Historically, none of these people really like each other. In the south we have a ton of oil, and in the north we have Port Sudan. Now in Asia we have this teeny tiny country called China, which buys 70% of Sudan's oil resources. The problem here is that all this oil is coming from the south, but all the money is going to the north, because that's where the port and the capital city are located. The South Sudanese see this and say, "Hey, we'll smite you." So this big civil war breaks out that lasts 22 years. Eventually, the South wins rights to 49% of oil profits, on paper anyways. Just when all of this is starting to look fine and dandy, Darfur is like, "Hey, why are we still living in the sticks?" And they make a new rebellion. The Sudanese government is pretty ticked off by now and will have no more of this, so they call up their buddy China. And, like any good friend would, China supplies them with some weapons of mass destruction. So the Sudanese government gets right to work and starts killing all the rebel sympathizers. That is, to them anyways, every single person in Darfur. Now in Darfur, we have two main rebel organizations leading the fight against the government. These are the Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement. These people are rather pathetically fighting against the government proxy militia, the Janjaweed, who use their fancy Chinese weapons to obliterate entire villages at a time. This is genocide. So, what would constitute a solution then? Well, the Sudanese government would have to quit killing its own civilians. That's a start, anyways. Second, to ensure the rebels stop rebelling, Darfur needs to start receiving adequate funding from their government. And last but not least, the Sudanese government needs to change hands, because the one that they have right now obviously isn't working, especially under the leadership of Omar al-Bashir, the instigator of all of this genocide nonsense. Now, before we investigate why nothing so far has been working, I think it's important to take a look at some of the key stakeholders in this issue and the action that they have tried to take. We have the United Nations. The reason they care about all this is because it's a humanitarian crisis, namely genocide. Oil was also a big key factor for the United Nations' interest until July 2011 when the South Sudan took its oil and peaced out. The United Nations have attempted to mediate the problem by hosting a number of fairly ineffectual peace talks, namely the one in Doha, where several of the concerned nations did not actually show up. Chad, the country bordering on Darfur, is pretty freaked out by all that has come to pass, so they show their support for their buddy Darfur by backing the Justice and Equality Movement. Chad figures since they are next door, it would probably be best to become homies with Darfur. But still, fighting against the Janjaweed, the Justice and Equality Movement has proven to be a pretty weak enterprise in protecting the lives of the civilians. China is a huge stakeholder here as well, because they've essentially made themselves the fanny pack of the Sudanese government. China is also the reason that the United States, as well as other large powerful countries, to this date have done fairly little to intervene. They don't want to tick off the ally China by messing with his friend Sudan. Now, given the criteria that I listed before, why do you think none of the internationalist approaches on solving the Darfur crisis have worked so far? And following the criteria listed, what do you think would be a better approach to solving the issue? Nationalist or internationalist?